Welcome. Glad you're tuned into our course on creating a growth surge. Because you're watching this video, I know you are a church leader who cares about your church, wants to see it grow, and you're passionate about reaching God's lost people in your community. My name is Stan Granberg. I'm with Kairos Church Planting. We've connected with hundreds of church leaders just like you through the years, working together to see God's kingdom grow. This video is part of our Growth Surge course, which talks about leveraging the natural big days of a church calendar to create a growth surge for your church. And our topic today is how to get leadership buy-in. In fact, if your church and leadership situation is normal, you have already thought, how will I get our leadership team or our elders on board with the growth surge? That's what we're going to address today. Anytime you're working with your leaders and trying to get them to buy in to one of your plan that you have, you need to answer the question, why? So let me give you 4 statistics right up front as to why knowing how to do a growth surge could be one of the most essential ministry tools in your pastoral toolbox. You've probably heard of some of these statistics, so let me give them to you here. 80% of all churches in America today are either plateaued or declining. Now that's not something to get just overwrought about, but it is something to pay attention to. This stat can often be used for blame or a scare tactic, but I want to give you some encouragement. If you're a healthy church of more than 200 attenders, maintaining 200 today is not bad. And here's why. Because 30% of your people are always going to be somewhere else than your church on a weekend. So if you're a church of 200 people, there are always 60 people who should be there who are not. And in a growth surge, our goal is to have 30% more people than our average attendance for the year. That will help us reach out to all those people who should be there, but who typically aren't there. And we talked about this goal in the introductory video. And if you haven't set your church surge goal yet, do it now. Find your average attendance for the year and add 30% to it. And number 3, the average committed Christian now attends church 2 times a month. That's amazing for many of us who grew up in a church context. But twice a month, that's the average. And number 4, in a typical church, in your church, you will probably experience a turnover of 10% of your people each year. Their jobs change, they retire, they move, they change churches, or they just drop out. And this means that you have to add 10% new people every year just to continue to be a plateaued church. So in one sense, you can say, if you're a plateaued church, it means you've got some growth going on, and that's good, because adding 10% new people each year is no small feat. These statistics means it takes more people than ever before to maintain a consistent attendance average across your year. And using a growth surge is one of your best strategies to connect with those new people that you need in your church. Our goal in this video is to help you gain the buy-in from your leadership team, your elder board, or whatever group you need to make your growth surge a reality. And what makes me so excited about helping you learn to use a growth surge is we see it work. Recently, I had a chance to visit a church, 21st century church on the West Coast. They typically had 3 worship experiences with about 900 people amongst those 3. And for Christmas growth surge, they planned 5 worship experiences and had over 1,800 people come through their doors. It's doubled their normal attendance. Now that's super exceptional, but we believe that you can see 30% more people during your growth surge because of that work that you put into it. Now the idea of a growth surge is based around the naturally occurring big days in your church's calendar year. we suggest that you develop a rhythm of 2 growth surge seasons in your church. One that goes from back to school to Friends Day in the fall, and the second that runs from Easter to Mother's Day in the spring. And our friend Tom Niebel calls this the 2-hump camel church calendar, where you start in the summer and then you have a growth surge through the fall, and then you hit the winter and then a growth surge again in the spring. And so you get that 2-hump camel calendar. And using these big days to create a growth surge, it may not be part of your leadership's experience. In fact, where growing churches will often multiply services for Easter or Christmas, churches without a growth mentality often reduce their number of services. And this means your church leaders may not have seen how a surge can be a growth producer in your church. And if you're going to have a successful growth surge, you're going to have to get the buy-in of your staff and your leadership team. So let's look at how you can get your leadership to buy in to offering a growth surge. When we talk about gaining leadership buy-in, there are 5 typical barriers that many church leaders meet that make them struggle to get on board. I bet you'll recognize these. The first one is precedence. Precedence, which means we've never done it like that before. And that is probably a truth that they're speaking. You see, people are comfortable with what they know and what they have experienced. And if your leadership team has not experienced growth surge, if that even vocabulary is not part of their vocabulary, they're going to be uncomfortable with it and resist the idea. The second barrier is theology. Just recently, I was at our gym and I heard a woman talking on her telephone, and she said, "But what does the Bible say?" And that's so common amongst our leadership. Is it biblical? But often what we call biblical is really something personal. And you'll probably need to probe to find out the theological resistance point. Some of the common objections about a growth surge revolve around the idea of, well, it's just entertainment, or this sounds like it's publicity and marketing, or even the idea of setting a goal and making a growth focus. Those are strange and maybe a little bit intimidating concepts, and so people resist them. The third barrier is fear. And we see this in many elderships because elders are, by the nature of their job, are stabilizing people. And when we do something that produces something new or produces growth, that's a destabilizing function. And so fear is oftentimes one of those barriers to a growth surge. And it's very easy for a group to let fear hold them hostage. But we don't want to have hostage takers or to let that be part of how we run our church. The fourth fear is the cost fear. How much does it cost? That's going to be a question that someone in your group is going to ask, and ask very quickly. And we have to be honest, it always costs something to do something, whether that be money or time or influence. In some way, we have to address the ROI, the return on investment, to demonstrate that the results will be worth the cost. And remember, there's also a cost associated with not doing something, and that's a cost that very seldom gets added into the equation. And the final barrier is failure. Anytime that we're setting a goal, we've set ourselves up for failure, because what if we don't make it? In his book, Failure of Nerve, Edwin Friedman suggests that the lack of leader courage may be the most insidious leadership illness there is. Being a leader inherently means taking risks, but these are going to be reasonable risks. So help your leaders overcome their failure of nerve. So let's talk about 5 buy-in strategies for you to use as you talk with your staff or your leadership team or your elders. The first one of those is develop a champion. The champion is someone who is going to be fairly naturally on your side, but they also carry weight amongst that leadership team. So since you can't go this alone, who among your elders can you cultivate as a champion? The champion should be someone that has that strong trust relationship both with you and the others in the group. Second is prep a game plan. So many times we go into a meeting and feel like, well, I think I can make this work, and we haven't thought strategically through what needs to happen in that meeting. So talk strategically and openly with your champion to come up with a game plan. What objections should you anticipate? You know your people well, and you probably have heard those objections before. Or what questions will they ask? Be prepared to answer them. Who will ask those questions or make those objections? Because they're going to be people that you're going to have to win over to this new idea. And remember, it may be a spouse who has the real weight behind that objection or a question. And the third strategy is the meetings before the meetings. Oftentimes we feel like, well, we can just go in and get this done, but there often have to be pre-meetings that happen. People don't like to not know. It makes them nervous. So when you're asking for a meeting, even with an individual person for, say, a coffee meeting, let that person know the topic and the reason. Instead of saying, well, I'd like to talk with you about something. Oh, that raises all sorts of anxiety because they don't know what it is. Tell them what you're wanting. Give them a heads up. I'd like to talk with you about a plan to grow our church this spring. And so before your big decision meeting, you may have to have several meetings before the meetings in order to help bring people along and cultivate the soil for the decision that you want to get. The fourth strategy is get out of the boardroom. You know, elders particularly, they have that room, and I'm going to put that X through that. They have a room that they get into to make their decisions, and that room is often the no room. I bet you understand that. Because when elders meet, they feel the weight of formal responsibility, which most often means don't rock the boat and no new ideas. But help your elders, your leadership team, listen from a different frame of mind by meeting in a more neutral location. I really like a living room or the home of your champion. Changing the scenery, getting into that informal, personal space will help your people be able to discuss easier and allow the questions to be asked and investigated better. So get out of the boardroom and into a living room. And finally, use a decision process. So often I ask leaders in churches, so how are you going to make this decision? And they'll sit there and stutter and look at each other and say, we don't really know. So help your leaders answer the questions they really need to answer. We've written a very simple, easy to use, how to make good decisions as a download. And you can click below and get that download, and it walks your leaders through the questions of could we and should we and will we, to help them make the best decisions that they can make. I don't know what your relationship is with your leadership team or your elders. I do know that even with the best relationships, helping people buy into a new idea is challenging, and it takes time. And I believe if you will use the ideas I've given you here, understand the barriers, and have these 5 buy-in strategies, that you're going to see progress. In our next video, you'll work on your church's storyboard. And your storyboard will begin to align your goals, your message, and your plan for your spring growth surge. Meanwhile, I'd love to hear from you in the comment bar below. How did your conversations go with your leadership team? What went well? Where did you feel you hit a snag? And if you have any questions or comments, include them too. I've been reading every comment and I'll respond to yours as well. So let me end with a prayer on your behalf. Father, let the conversations being planned and held be full of grace, seasoned well with truth, and covered over with hope. And bless these good men and women as they lead their churches towards a spring growth surge on behalf of your lost people. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.